The kids can't read that. It's what? That's what you're talking about. Well, they don't do time going round, it's digital. So this goes round. Thank you very much for coming today. If you don't mind, I'm set up to sit down. But I'll stand up for the second. I'm doing 4 things, but I'll sit down. If you can't see in the back, well, you're in the best seats. So these are four tales or stories for grown-ups, right? There's no fairies, wizards or foxes in these, though there are animals, and there are adult themes. You're going to be disappointed now, aren't you? And they span over a number of years of writing. 2 of them are in a collection of stories of mine called Some Kind of Immortality, and 2 aren't. The first one is Throwing the Punch. That takes us back to the 1940s and back in time, and also underground. Throwing the Punch. If you want to know about a man, watch how he treats animals, or promote him over his mates. Give a man power and he'll use it or abuse it according to his nature. In all my years underground, I learned that. Put a man in the dark and put the squeeze on him, then watch out for the bad blood to come up in a well. Take the fight between Mackintosh and Whistler on the night shift in the Lady Margaret, 30 years back or more it was, but as clear as day to me now. Mining was a protected industry, the war effort, dig for victory, coal against the Nazis. So he was working double hard. They drafted hundreds of lads into the mines at that time, Bevin boys, all in a line, balls in your hands, cough, and then you Army, you Navy, you RAF, you the pit, and so on. Lily whites, most of them, straight from school or their mam's apron. If they had 2 legs and a pair of lungs, they was fit for digging. Only some of them wasn't suited to the pit. It's all right if he was born to it, father before you, accepting it as what men in a certain village did, and that was that. But going down a pit is the nearest thing to hell for some. A daily grave, I remember someone calling it. Whistler was one of those Bevin boys. Only he wasn't called Whistler from the start. His name was Richards, I think. Though it's so long since he was called that at work, I can't be sure. Big enough for a lad. Pretty good shape on him, really. So you couldn't have guessed there'd be trouble. But trouble there was. As soon as his turn came up at the top, as the cage clanked back up and the first men came out after their shift, Richards, Whistler, started to shake. Dew! The sweat came out of him, just like someone had turned on a tap. It was running down his face and neck, soaking his shirt. You could hear his teeth, but he didn't say nothing. I was next to him and gave Will Peters, the other side, a nod. We pressed him on both sides and managed to shuffle him into the cage. When the gate locked, he seemed to let go and loosen against us. That's when the screaming started. All the way down, we was deafened. They could hear us coming at the bottom like the bomb that's got your name on it. He fell out of the cage. And Will Peters, having the room to swing now, laid such a bloody slap across his face, and that did it. Of course, there was no question of him going up to the face. A man like that would be too much of a liability at the coalface. That's where the money's made. And those boys worked their stalls like little empires. No, the foreman got word and the Whistler was put on the horses. That's how he got his name. The boy had a way with them, talking them calm, talking himself calm, I suppose, as well, and whistling. the whole time. We must have had 300 horses, maybe more, underground at that time in the Lady Margaret. Mining's always been a cruel industry. Back in the real old days, they used to use children for hauling, and women, sometimes pregnant even. It didn't matter to the owners. They turned a blind eye to everything except the tally sheet. Keep the drams coming out steady and full was all that mattered. Anyway, each of these horses had a name. Albion, Betty, Crusader, Dreadnought, right down the alphabet and back again. And they all had housing in the stables underground. Once down there, a horse would never see the light of day again. Better, more humane in a way, I suppose, because once they got used to the gloom of the pit, their eyes would never have taken the full glare of the sun again. It's bad enough for a man coming up out of that hole after a shift and taking the strength of the daylight. Whistler didn't have any horses in his background. I found out later that he was just another dive from Pontypridd, whose old man had a corner shop. But he seemed happy with them. "They're my real wages," he said. "I'm happy talking to them." He was so happy that after a week or so, he'd almost bounced down the cage. Mind you, he never went up to the face, stuck to the horses and looking after them. He'd still be there today if it hadn't been for Mackintosh. Now, Mackintosh was the son of a Scotsman who'd come into Wales back in the 20s to scab during the lockout times. You know, everything changed after 1926. It was a good sense of comradeship you had in the mines until then. Afterwards, the whole business went sour in the mouth. Debts and rumours and hatred and backbiting. Not so much of the butties, but every man Jack after his own slice, wasn't it? You could see it in the eyes narrowing, like everyone was looking for the next move from someone. Well, Mackintosh followed his father into the pit, was always a big man for the money. I know what they say about the Scotch people, and a lot of rubbish it is to tar a whole country with the same brush, I'm sure. But this Mackintosh could have carried the whole blame on his shoulders. A real mean bastard he was, and doing anyone down that he could. He used to work times at the slaughterhouse in the next village, a big bugger with plenty of muscle in his arms, but a tire of a beer belly pushing out against his buckle belt too. "Jock's the lad," he'd shout in his bouts of bragging. He was a drunkard, but a loner, for at work or after in the pub, he'd set his temper on a short fuse. If Whistler was considerate and caring for the pit ponies, then he was alone in that way for being attached to them. Men who'd never dream of kicking a dog in their back lanes would kick out at a horse in anger underground. Coal mining is a hard, frustrating business, and with the pressure on you constantly to fill your drams and make your rate for wages, tempers can be spilled easier than coal. You daren't let fly at another collier, though. The two things that are absolutely taboo down below are matches and punches. One or the other gets you your marching orders sharpish. I'm not saying as this Mackintosh was the only one, but he was renowned for his cruelty. Not in short blasts of temper, but slow, lingering, unnatural-like. I'd see him take a rat and hold it with his boot against a rail so a truck would cut it living in half. "Jock's the ratting lad," he shouted in squeaky excitement. That business of calling him by his own name, like he was doing something, but outside of himself all the while. All in all, there was something peculiar about that man. Well, this one night shift, there was a sort of tension in the Lady Margaret. Two men had gone down under a fall during the day, and one of them was said to be near to death with a broken back. The Penderyn district had come across bad workings and more gas than usual too. Sometimes when you cut into the seam, it breathes and groans back at you. Some will tell you it can sing or play like organ pipes. Weird it is. Anyway, the feeling was that the sooner the end of the shift and the end of the week came, the better. Mackintosh was handling a horse called Tudor. A tired lump of bones, that poor beast was too. 4 tins of dog meat and a pint of glue, as they say. Likely as not, the horse was on the back end of a double shift. For although the ponies were brought back to stables for cleaning down, feeding and watering after a shift, quite often it was that the tally wasn't held to. And within minutes, the poor animal was being drawn out again by a miner on the next shift. A man pushing to get his wages up to a living level isn't going to look too closely at the only horse he's offered. Sometimes a beast would work a double header then, the second shift miner demanding as much from the animal as his first handler. Tudor was pretty well done for. But there's nowhere to run to for a horse down there in the dark. He was craning his neck down to the feed bag that was hung low down around him. That meant he was distracted from his job of pulling, and Mackintosh wasn't making the time with his drams that he wanted. "Come on, you lazy bugger, move your carcass." Mackintosh punching the flank of the beast and lashing with his foot, and the horse leaning into the harness and struggling to take the incline with a loaded dram. Well, it seems Mackintosh called a halt and was bending down to wedge the wheels firm on the slope when the horse eased the weight and the back wheel came close to depriving the miner of his fingers. "Jesus, I'll have you this time." And instead of laying more kicks into the horse, he goes cool dangerous and takes loose the feed bag from around Tudor's neck. Uncoupling the iron shackles from an empty truck, he adds them to the bag and replaces it round the horse's neck. Now those metal shackles must weigh a mighty bit. Just think of that lumped onto an already tired horse. It brought the beast's head down to breaking point, and the full dram to be taken up the incline too. God knows how he made it, but he did, and the bulk of the rest of the shift as well. Then, when Mackintosh has settled down for his food break, tucking into his snap tin like a pig, he leaves the weight on the horse and keeps him from the water too. Now, whether it was that Whistler happened that way, or whether someone had dropped word of what Mackintosh was up to, I don't know. But anyway, along he comes as if nothing was out of order. "How's me Tudor then? Weary old boy, eh?" Patting the horse along its flank, and no doubt feeling the welts as he went. Then he goes to fasten up the feed bag. "Leave it be," snarls Mackintosh. "Entitled to a feed like you or me," reasons Whistler. And then, "What's this though? Where's his proper meal? There's a ton in this bag. What's your game, man?" "What's it to you, boy? Mind your own." "Have me get this thing off, you cruel bastard," said Whistler, struggling with the bag. "Leave it bloody well on and see to your own business." And Mackintosh got up from his snap. "He's my horse this shift, and he'll work to my ways, good-for-nothing knackered lump." Whistler had managed to loosen the strap on Tudor's bag and was removing the weight when the Scotsman's hand grabbed his shoulder. Whistler must have put everything into swinging around and planting his fist in Mackintosh's face, for the bigger man went down like an axed steer. Blood spread from his nose and mouth, and he coughed on it. Whistler's hand wasn't too good either after that blow, and he completed the job of watering the horse mostly with his left hand. Welcome that water was for the beast too. But he hardly moved apart from his drinking head. It must have been all so much of a muchness to him after those years down the pit, the damp, the explosions, the curses, the constant low roofs peering down his back. There was Mackintosh in the dust, wiping his sleeve across his face and spitting out, bastard horse, over and over, low and bitter. Whistler turned away to the horse again, was unshackling the animal from the truck. There, fella, Tudor boy, there. But at that moment, along comes the overman. The thing about overmen is their noses. They can smell trouble from the other end of the pit working. Something up here, then, he says. Bit of trouble? Nothing, boss, says the Scotsman, struggling to back to his feet and turning his head away from the light. Anything up for you, Whistler? Well, old Tudor here be on his last legs. Looks to me like he's done a double shift. No point killing a horse for a bit more coal. He needs changing over. Oh, I see. Well, that's all right then, isn't it? Says the overman, turning to go. And then, caught a piece of rock, have you, Jock? Stupid bloody pit prop, came the mumbled reply. It was hardly uttered with conviction, but Roberts, the overman, had more sense than to push it. Give a man a chance to spit out his grievance, and then let it be, was the order of the day. Word got round that shift, and Jock gave his notice in that week. He left for the Jubilee pit over in the next valley, but didn't stick it long. He moved over to Slaughterman full-time. He had a real forte in that area, no doubt. Whistler was one of the first of the Bevan boys we got in the Lady Margaret in those war years. Most of them stuck it out, ham-fisted and grumbling. A couple threw worse fits than Whistler's, screams, kicking, you name it. One fainted as the cage began to drop and concussed himself on the gate. As the pace of production speeded up, the manager began to throw the shaky ones back into the pool. Maybe some of them got landed in submarines or up icy crow's nests on the Russian convoys. We each gets his lot, don't we? Whistler was a quiet, good worker, and I wouldn't mind betting he did some good with his influence over caring for the horses. Certainly, he had no call to bloody anyone's nose again that I heard of. But mining is no sort of vocation if you've got any sense and the price of a bus ticket. And Whistler was away as soon after VE Day as he could. I'd like to think of him going on with the horses. At stables, maybe, a brewery dray, or settling into an old trade like blacksmithing. But that's just sentimental. He's probably on the buses in some city, or maybe worked up to clerking in an office and counting the days to retirement. Sometimes we go all our lives pulling back from the thing we ought to do. But whatever happened in the long run, Whistler had his moment. You can't take that away. Throwing the punch. Thank you. I'll do two, and then we'll take a little break. Well, that's something else. This is Madame de Lapin. Our first few summers over here, it was groundwork. Fixing the roof and pointing the old stones. The house had been abandoned from way back, so we could afford it. But we're there for the long haul. Everyone smiled or shrugged. No problems with the locals, even before we became locals. Monsieur Boussac in the old farm down the track was patient with our school French and the endless paperwork. Who in the local market was recommendé, which stalls were rousset, though we found everything was so cheap and authentic. His 3 remaining cows gave us milk. There was cheese from his cousin. Sue started to turn the ground behind our sagging barn into a garden. Madame l'appelait, vous devez lui rendre visite. He gestured beyond the wood. C'est une sorcière. Then kissed his fingers like a gourmet in a bad film. Légumes, prunes, pois, lapin. Lapin. It was years since we'd had a rabbit at home. Who caught rabbits? Though after the war, Sue's father had a ferret and a terrier and put meat on the table from his nets staked over the warren between them and the railway line. We walked up through the woods and Madame met us at her gate. She pointed to her barn, and when she swung open the doors, the place was full of rabbits fenced in, 100 or more. Bugs Bunny, Thumper, Roger Rabbit. They had straw, and the tops of greens and cabbages were strung from the rafters. They jumped and seemed happy. They nibbled at the food. No need for dogs or ferrets here. They were kept and fed and knew no better. Madame stepped over the wire, and they came to sniff at her boots. She bent down to stroke them, then picked one up, lifted it into her arms, and cooched it like a kid or lamb.
C'est espoir, ma petite,
She said, and led us out into the yard. There were barrels, a stack of old tools, and a labourer tractor which hadn't moved for years. It must have puttered past panzers hidden under the cover of the woods for the counterattack. It lacked one tyre, and its seat had fallen to the ground. Il est très historique, I said, feeling stupid.
oui, dans les années 40.
And without breaking stride, Madame swung the chosen one by its legs against the engine cowl and brained it. On her kitchen table, she skinned and wrapped it in newspaper.
60 francs, s'il vous plaît, monsieur, madame.
Ça va? Said Mr. Boussac on our return. We showed him the rabbit's tidy joints and he gave a nod. The neat rib cage and the separated, flattened little liver.
Très spécial pour vous, mon bon appétit.
She'd said. We offered him the parcel, but he waved us away. Mouton, vin rouge, un très bon repas. So I cooked it in our creuset, but Sue wouldn't touch it. I said, look, it's less cruel than suckling pig or foie gras. We eat what we have to eat. Stalingrad, the Irish famine. At the end in Saint Malo, when the Germans locked the gates and battened down against that terrible bombing, there was no cat, dog, or rat to be seen. Just lapin du boche, the bones picked clean. Thank you. We're about halfway through, and the other story from Some Kind of Immortality. I've got a couple of copies of this book, the story behind this book, but I'll share that with you later. It's the title story from this book, and it's got. This book is worth buying for the painting's astonishing. It's by Sally Moore, who's now in England, via Oxford and so on. But one of the finest painters that South Wales has produced, and it is an astonishing painting. Some Kind of Immortality. Again, not strictly speaking from personal experience. Shut up.
Hope not.
Are you okay? Can I stand?
Do what you like. Yeah, it's fine. I've moved. Yeah.
Okay. Some Kind of Immortality. This is the second time with this one. Call her Alice. Belts and braces. She needs to make sure it works. Though for my part, there's never been a problem. And this will be straightforward. She's not unfanciable. 35 or thereabouts, about my height. Auburn hair swept back and held by a tortoiseshell clip. Businesslike, neat. Laptop googling away on the coffee table to indicate that she's busy, end of a working day. No offer of coffee this time. On the bathroom shelf above the closed toilet lid on which I'm sitting are copies of National Geographic, An Old Private Eye, Gone Girl with a page turned down two-thirds of the way through, and a copy of Playboy. Thoughtful, that. A teacher? Possibly. But I've seen no pile of exercise books on the previous visit or this one. Middle management, I'd guess. Stalled in the middle of a management career, same rung on the ladder for long enough to think that the ladder may not really be there. This semi on a socially rising avenue in Highthorpe. New reg Audi 3 on the drive. No problem with my parking just round the corner and walking to the door. My car will be untouched on my return. Discreet. Which will be within the next 10 minutes, as she is not, as I take it, one for small talk. Nothing that isn't on my form. Nice curve to those jeans. No need for Miss January. Thank you, Mum. It's a service. No, I mean that, a service. I'm discreet and only go freelance because of the restrictions of the agency. restricted rights, lots of forms to fill in, all bits of cloak and dagger, 10 donations maximum. Their office is above one of the estate agents on Montague Street, a small plaque, Family Matters. And when your turn comes, Gaynor is sitting behind a desk, always with an angle poise over her papers, whatever the weather, winter dark or summer shine. One of those indeterminate ages. Think Dame Judy as M in The World Is Not Enough. Pierce Brosnan? I don't know. Certainly before Daniel Craig, anyway. And Family Matters is better than the HFEA, though Gaynor is registered or something, and going by the forms I had to fill in over and over again, she takes care. But she draws the line after 10, though I know that I can and should go further. And don't get me wrong, I stick to the rules, no alcohol, no sex, regulations, so many days before. Oh, pretty much stick to them. It's not that straightforward if you have a life partner or a live-in wife, which is where I am now. I'm as upfront as far as possible, leaving the women my mobile, or a mobile at any rate, because I care about the success and the consequences. The children, I care. I'd like to think that in years to come, 4 years to come, I could stay in touch, though that's unlikely, isn't it? And I know that the 10 only rule is so that years down the line, no two half siblings could meet and marry and risk serious problems with their own children. I'm fully aware and take lots of precautions. I keep a record of dates and addresses, contact numbers, and I'm very wary of going to donate in the same areas of the same towns. I can cover the whole of the Midlands, sometimes with an alibi further afield, and well, do the maths. It's unlikely, isn't it? Also, I leave the birth to them. How could I do otherwise? I missed our Alex because I was in a meeting in York, but I was there for Rachel, though what use I was, I still don't know. There's been university research in London arguing that the mother would rather have another woman, sister or friend, than her bloke there. I'd be rather difficult to explain away with this lot, wouldn't I? To my mind, the woman is always the mother, by law. But the father is only the father. It's a one-way, unbalanced system. And this way I can keep control and to a greater extent maintain some rights, an extended interest and possibly a commitment. The forms and the websites are clear and cold. Height, hair colour, nationality, race, education. And I've ticked enough of those boxes. I mean, who would choose baker or construction worker when there are any number of postgrads, researcher, law student, naval officer, and the like? Why shouldn't she choose a professional? As for my side, I do ask for a photograph from the client. I'm not George Clooney, but I reckon that I have attributes: tall enough, healthy enough, half-decent degree, followed by a career of sorts. And I look a bit younger than I am. What's not to like? And so far, they seem to like. But I have to judge them too. I'll not be wasted on a, and you may not like me saying this, but how else to put it? I'll be wasted on an ugly woman. And there's no STD problem with me. I'm a devoted husband and father. I have no need to take on the whole business, and I am happy filling a pot. I've been discriminating, and I give an honest service, never more than once a week. If that. No second pressing of the vintage from me. Though there are online boasters who reckon to fire off hits like a Gatling gun in a spaghetti western. I'm more of a Seamus Heaney childhood frog spawn bloke. And that image, harking back to that poem we did in school, is my way of dealing with it. Lots of minute dots becoming tadpoles, and enough of them swimming the right way. That's been my way of visualizing it. So this one, Alice. Alice? Yes, Alice. Well, Aston Villa will be filed for her. Month, postcode, date of success, date of delivery, A. Jan CV 33TB 22/3 NOV in my laptop's United Fixtures list. Because Jan would never open that or understand the relationship or blatantly obvious non-relationship between those listings and the football club I follow. Of course, the money has to be sort of laundered. The official setups can cost these women well over £1,000, more for certified Oxbridge types. There's even been an egg-broking company targeting Cambridge undergrad girls for their eggs. Almost £1,000 a time. That's each, not in half dozen boxes from bloody Waitrose. Then there's the online Oxford graduate sperm donor. That's the sort who can't even spell guaranteed on his website. It's a bloody minefield out there in the wider sperm donor community. Some years back, when they ruled that donors had no right to anonymity, the flow had nearly trickled out, as it were. Women are forced to go abroad, like the States, and that costs, well, who knows? British is best, right? Stem cell research can end up producing a baby with 2 mothers and a father, or whatever wacky combination you choose. Talk about a split personality. IVF, I don't have a problem with, but check the websites. Again, there's a premium on Oxford eggs. Think eugenics, Brave New World, The Handmaid's Tale, Margaret Atwood, eat your heart out. The future's here, baby. At Family Matters, I only came across a couple of other blokes in reception. We all kept our heads down in the car mags, or with our heads up following the swirls of the carpet. I sort of aged, though I noted an expensive pair of brogues and a designer suit on one of them. No, it's online that you get the wide, wild, wonderful, wacky world of the donors. From the earnest graduate students to the frankly bonkers supreme white race types, thinly disguised and some not disguised at all. Didn't the Nazis have breeding brothels? Lebesbron, the blonde, blue-eyed fountain of life? I heard that geneticist guy, Steve Jones, talking on the radio once. He got really animated about crufts, racehorses, all those pedigree animal breeding businesses. He said that it was unnatural, perverse, and against the normal workings of the world. The natural order was that there should be no restrictive order at all. Intermarriage, sex across the cultural and racial divisions, mixing up the genes, kept all the lottery numbers in play. At uni, one of our history lecturers claimed that if Hitler had kept the Jews and their brains on his side instead of destroying their bodies, it would have been his side winning. No contest. And we'd all be speaking German now. That stirred the class up and woke up a few at the back. Who knows who they are, really? Steve Lee, in the next office to us, has traced his family tree and come up with Romany connections. Another lot who fell foul of Adolf the failed painter. They're not from Egypt, you know, but from tribes of people going back for centuries in northern India. He said someone researched the gypsies in Wales, where there's a lot of them apparently, and found out that their DNA was more Indian in characteristic than most people in India. Not so much to do with the randy squaddies of the British Army in the days of empire, more to do with the closed communities of the Romani, who rarely married out. Problems there, of course. Who knows who they are? What about centuries of mistresses kept by our kings? Dukes and favourites who were well looked after, but all a bit royal, perhaps. I once read a piece about the painter Augustus John. Seems he couldn't walk through Soho without stopping to press a shilling into each child's hand in case they were his. How many children had Lady Macbeth? How many children had Lucian Freud? Last time he took the kids down to London, the Eye, the Zoo, the moat of poppies at the Tower, Jan, who is in social services, also wanted us to go to the Foundling Museum in Bloomsbury. Unwanted babies were left in the gutter in 18th century London until this childless sea captain, Mr. Coram, set up an orphanage, supported by patronage, concerts by Handel, paintings by Hogarth auctioned, royals in support. There's an exhibition of the tokens which mothers left in the hope of later recognizing and reuniting with their children. Buttons, clips. But that never happened. The children were all sent to be wet nursed in distant villages like Hampstead and Dulwich and given new names. The girls went into service and the boys to the Navy or the Army. It's all a balance of ordering and chance. Bastard was a legal description in this country until 1969. If Mum had got caught at university, I'd have been a bastard and probably given up for adoption. Think of your future, my dear, your career. I can just hear my in-laws counselling common sense. All those poor buggers shipped out to Canada, Australia, many of them poor, and many of them buggered too. In the museum cafe, the walls were decorated with the names of famous orphans and foundlings. Moses, Oliver Twist, Superman, Romulus and Remus, Nelson Mandela, Keats, Tolstoy, Satchmo, Marilyn Monroe, Steve Jobs, all orphans, all walls covered with kids abandoned or bereft. So what's the problem? My ladies are guaranteeing at least one loyal, desperate, concerned and focused parent, aren't they? These children, our children, will be fine. They're not orphans. No tokens will be needed to secure their future. They have the welfare state, not to mention my genes. I've made this pact with myself. I'll go on for another 3 years. Alex, our oldest, will be going to the comp, then Rachel won't be far behind. And as for telling Jan, perhaps sometime in the future when our lives are run on a bit. But it would have to be the right moment. And I can't really see when that might be. The money I make is in an account for the kids and will help with their education. Should be a useful few grand by then. Seed money, you might say. And I don't do the sex. Tried it once, carried the guilt for too long afterwards. This way it's more rational. I'm at a distance, and if I hear nothing more, well, I can handle it. The sex was in Solihull, Wendy, Wolves, as it happens. And I was tempted to swing by there for months afterwards. That way madness lies. Swings and roundabouts, schools of thought, playgrounds, the egg and sperm race. I'm wandering, making a life and killing time. It's been half an hour and I should get back to her. Flush and splash. For 600 quid, they expect a bit more than 5 minutes. Though that's what it takes. I shall emerge with the treasure between my right forefinger and thumb, the pot of gold, the Milky Way, her future. It's at this point that, yes, it's starting. Always the space oddity. Do, 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 do. That comes into my head. I'm a rocket man and his capsule. Squeaky clean courtesy of her Gilchrist and Soames on the sink between two perfectly polished taps. She has my mobile, a mobile, the one that sits in my desk drawer at the office, but I expect to hear nothing from her for a month. If then, no conversation. It will work. It always has. Thank you. And thank you, ma'am. Don't leave it in the sun, you know, it degrades quickly. But it's still a story. I'm essentially a poet, but all my poems, the vast majority of my poems tell stories. Because that's what people want to hear, stories. They don't want to hear about your angst or your sperm count or anything. You know, they don't want to hear about that. They want to hear stories. And this is an astonishing story, and it's one of the best things ever appeared in any of my books, or any of the books of poetry in Wales. It's a superb piece of writing, and I didn't write it. It's a letter from John, and I'll tell you where it came from afterwards, perhaps. Now, John comes from North Pembrokeshire, and above the Landscale line, it was all Welsh, all right? It's before the First World War, and John's in love, and he has to send a letter to distant parts. I mean, we've been to England, South Wales, Valleys, France, and we're in darkest Pontypridd with this one. Letter from John. His English isn't very good. It was not for want of think that I did not write you a love letter sooner. And this because I think of you every hour of the day and every day of the year. And I do love your father because he did lend you the horse and cart to brought me to the train on Monday. I shall never forget to remember what you did tell me when coming in the cart. Oh, Mary Jane, stick to your promise, won't you, my dear? I did drive Pontypridd safe and sound, and I did go straight to the shop. And when the master did see me, he did say, "Man, from where are you?" And I told him that I was John from Mine Clochog, coming to work in his shop. Then he knowed me in a minute. Look you, my work is selling cotton and tapes and hundreds of other things. They do all call it happy compartment or something. But indeed to goodness, it was not very happy at all to be here without you, the girl I do love better than nobody. For all the time I'm thinking of you. Oh yes, you will ask my mother to send my watch if it is working, 'cause it will be very handy for me in the morning to know what o'clock it is. She do know my directions. There is a lot of girls in this shop, but not one to match you, Mary Jane. How long are you going to stop at Mrs. Jones's again, Mary Jane? 'Cause I will try and get you a job at Pontypridd to be a milliner. I will ask Mr. Thomas the draper about a position for you, for they say he do give very good victuals to his clerks. It will be better by half for you to come to Pontypridd, because then we will be near to one another. For the forehead of Mrs. Thomas's shop and the forehead of our shop be quite close to one another. And by, we will marry, is it not, my dear? They say that shop girls do not make good wives. But you know what Mr. Evans, the schoolmaster, used to say? Put a nose wherever you like, it will be a nose. Put a donkey wherever you like, it will be a donkey. And like that, you are Mary, my dear. I believe shop girls will make good wives if they have a chance. Well, I'll not write you a bigger this time, for if it was twice bigger, I could never tell you how I love you. I did send you a piece of poultry I did make last night, and you have not received it, send back at once. I must finish, because I can hear somebody asking for hooks and eyes, and your loving John must go forward. Oh, Mary Jane, my darling, I love you in my heart. I told you so last Monday when coming in the cart. Suppose the horse did understand what you did say. I have no doubt, my darling, it would have run away. I'll always love you, Mary Jane, and you be true to me. Come up soon to Pontypridd, sell some drapery. Thank you. Well, there's my 4 tales for grown-ups, but...
They're so diverse, your stories. I mean, where do your ideas come from?
Oh, it's sheer genius. and like Yola Morgana, got a lot of heroin. No, I keep my ears. I'm a magpie. My life has been, you know, on the whole, everything went. I passed the exams I should have passed it. Got the job, and it was it's kind of boring. I like living in Cowbridge. It's kind of boring. Like it's all right, you know. But occasionally if you keep your ears and your eyes open, you pick up things. The first one, throwing the punch, takes me back to when Jane and others were at South Glamorgan College of Education. That was my first college job when I came back to Wales in '74. And just before it closed, because unfairly it was closed after about 5 years, wasn't it? There was a porter there, and I got talking to him. And he told me that story almost, well, I'm saying word for word. I can't remember. But I know I went home at lunchtime, because you could do it. It was only half a job, really. Went home at lunchtime. I thought, God. I just tried to keep his voice in my head, you know, about Whistler and Macintosh. And I don't know whether those were the names. But this business of of Bevan boys, which I didn't really know about, being forced to go down the pit, you know, that was as bad as being sent to the front. And then conquering it by the end. It's a lovely, and that's the way he told it. And I think it was a Scotsman that, or Scotchman as they call him, who gets punched, and quite rightly so. Oh, Macintosh, you bastard! And so I went home and wrote it. And then in '82, that was, and this is why I know how long this is. That was a Radio 4 short story, 14 and a half minutes. So. So that got me going. One of the first stories that I wrote that wasn't an attempt to write about my boring life, you know. And I just think it's a great story. But again, I can't claim much credit for it. I had the right ears in the right corridor at the right time, you know. But we need to remember those things, the Bevan boys and so on, you know. Yeah. Hi.
Yeah, Tony, when you write a tale, do you kind of write it all the way through, kind of mostly in one draft, and then come back and look at it and edit it?
Yeah, just like everybody else. Well, usually. I mean, I've got out me at the age of 75. I wrote my first novel, but it's not it's a bitty novel, and I've written another one which is looking for a publisher at the moment. That was a different matter. I think stories and poems. You know, I come down the tennis club. I've always, you know. People who go, oh God, I'm a writer, you know, I don't go out for days. Oh, good, just don't go somewhere. I mean, if you write poems and stories, they're kind of manageable, and that's what I feel happiest doing. But I mean, I'm not happy if I haven't got something on the go. And I mean, I started in 1966, January, because my parents bought me a typewriter for my birthday's on Boxing Day. I had a typewriter. So I was a pretentious young undergraduate trying to, you know, I'm still doing that. Nobody shorts out a type, you know. And then you'd get something wrong, you have to type it out again. But nowadays with the word processor, it's dead simple. So although I often start with a piece of writing, I'm almost immediately on the word processor and moving things about. And I don't know how anybody managed to write something like a novel or a play before word processors. My God, how did they do it? Because you could just switch, you can keep several versions, you know what you can do, you know, it's brilliant. So writing's a lot easier than it used to be, you know.
Do you ever get poetry out of a story or vice versa?
Yeah. My friend, late friend and great mentor, Danny Absey, if he had a good story, he always told it about 4 different ways. It turns up in a play or one of his novels or a poem. I think, yes, it has. I've got one called Returning the Stones, which is a short story about a couple who always used to go to the same beach in Pembrokeshire. It's Manorbier, where we had a place. And always try and pick up, he and his wife would always try and pick up a pebble that's kind of heart-shaped. And then she dies. And they take them back to England and arrange them in their garden. Then she dies and he goes back, and every time he goes, he throws them back into the sea. So that's a story and a poem in one of the books. And it works in slightly different ways.
Yes,
but
you met the man on the beach.
I met the man, and yeah, again, it's not my story. I met the guy on the beach, and he said, I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm bringing the Stones back. I mean, that makes you cry. What a wonderful thing to do, you know. You don't have to make up too many things, and that's why I don't do wizards and foxes and elves and stuff. Life's too interesting. There's plenty of interest anyway, you know.
Explain about the letter to John.
Oh, letter to John, sorry, yeah. I was born in my grand's council. We were so poor we didn't even have our own council house. I was born in my grand's council house in Pentevelin Street, Carmarthen, and I'd left college and we were teaching. My gran died in the late 80s, and I went back, and my dad was in the middle of dying. So my uncle and I went through her stuff, and she was a country woman, you know, from Pembrokeshire. And there wasn't a lot of literature in the house, but I looked at it, and there was this letter. And it was what I read to you. It was on 4 sheets of little, you know, letter paper, written beautifully with ink, proper ink, remember ink, with a proper pen. I thought, hang on, what's this? I took it home and I thought, gosh, this is amazing. This is part of, but the thing is, my gran was called Beatrice Mary, not Mary Jane. I've never found out who Mary Jane was. Or John. Try finding John from Ein Clochog, you know, you got a nobody chance, you know. Ancestry, forget it. And I thought, you know what, I'll just type it out. And as it was typing it out, it fell into the prose bits, fell into kind of lines. And I thought, this is a found poem. And the bit of verse at the end, I'll always love you, Mary Jane, and you be true to me, that was written out as his bit. And he put poultry on the top, his little joke. I mean, you can't make that up. So that's, whoever he was, I don't know if he ever made it to Pontypridd. Ironically, I did, because I ended up working there, you know. But I don't know, but I'd like to think that somewhere, you know, you're giving life to something, a moment that happened. But I want my gran. I don't know what she was doing with that letter. But I thought, okay, I'll do that. I think we're all tripping over stories, poems, songs all the time. It's just some of us hear it and go home and scribble it down, you know. I don't know whether, I can't even remember who that guy was on that college corridor, one of the porters we call him, I don't know, you know. And I don't think I told him, I wouldn't have seen him because we moved from that campus. I don't know whether he ever realized that his story was on the radio, but yeah.
Tony, there's a story in the book with the Sally Moore on.
Yeah.
And it's about a pretty stressful encounter on a golf course.
Oh, shit.
I don't have to talk about it, but I mean, I keep that by the side of my bed.
Oh, you got to get out more. You got to get out more, kid.
I do read them a lot.
Yeah.
And
So,
that one,
yeah.
What
Yeah.
about that? Because that's real, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. It was. Yeah. I used to. We had a little place in Pembrokeshire, you know, and we used to go down, and I had a country membership at Tenby Golf Club, and I used to play, but I used to, you know, as my legs got worse, I'd play 9 holes. I'd go on, if you know Tenby, I'd go on a Penally halfway through the course and play 9 holes in the middle and go off again. Never went to the clubhouse. I'm not a clubhousey sort of bloke, actually. Anyway, I was there one day, and yes, that happened. That I was putting on the 11th green, and this dog came. And then it came again, it picked my bloody ball up. Come on. And this guy came along, and we had a confrontation. And the story's about, really, I should have. You don't pick a fight with someone who's got 14 weapons, right? From a driver to a putter. You don't do that. And I didn't hit him.
He was aggressive, wasn't he?
But part of me wanted to fucking brain him. Because he got, you know, he was in my face. I said, first of all, you're not supposed to be on the golf course. The beach is over by there, but all right? And it got very nasty. He was drunk. And I thought, you know, Professor having a game of golf, I could have killed him and got away with it.
You could have, yeah.
I could have killed him and got away with it. He was attacking me. He was in my face. And, you know, and at one point I had a 4-iron in my hand. And I went, you know, come on, back off, fella, you know. And part of me, that was the dark side, really. I thought, how dare you? How dare you? And then I didn't hit him. And I felt so reduced as a man after that. I thought, you wimp, why didn't you give him, you know, just break his kneecap or something. You didn't have to, you know, just do, you know. And I thought, oh shit, it would have gone on for months, and you know, it was awful. But no, that was real, yeah. You don't fuck with the professor on the golf course, right? But I mean, it's yeah. I'm sorry you raised that. They all hate me now, don't they? Some of these people are my neighbours, you know.
Power, I find it very powerful.
Well, I mean, that was my way of getting. I thought, you know, I haven't manned up. So I'll go and write something about it and about that. I clearly did the right thing by not doing the wrong thing. But part of me just wanted to, you know, how dare you? You know, you don't want some stranger's dog licking your balls on the 11th green, you know. Come on. Okay. No more secrets. There are some books over there. They're all a tenner. This one, this is a sad story. This was published just, the selected poems, which I'll also sell for a tenner, though it's more than that, came out after, it was 50 years of writing in 2016. And so that's got the letter from John in. The latest book of poems, which is last year, has got Madame de Lapin and a lot of nice stories in. But the book of stories, it came to a sad end. Some publisher took them, and then she ran off to France and pulped most of them. So the last 10 are over there, where I've got 2 at home, or 3 at home for the kids. But so it appeared, and then it didn't appear. So if anyone out there knows a publisher, I think somebody should republish this, you know. I could add a couple to it and freshen them up a bit. But I mean, it was so angry. I'd waited. It's the only time anyone had published my stories, and then she did a runner. And if you come up to me afterwards, I'll tell you who she was. And if I only had a 4-iron, Thank you very much for coming. Thanks for listening. You can buy Llaeth Llan from Waitrose. It's great on your apple tart, all right?
You didn't tell him where the sperm donor story came from.
No.
You didn't tell him that the
Radio
other story was James.
No, I know. I didn't want to compromise.
It was embarrassing.